Hi folks, Buckley here. Going to get you started using SolidWorks for the first time. SolidWorks is the CAD package or computer-aided design software package that we'll be using in this course. It's one of 3 commonly used CAD packages out in the world of engineering. The others that you may encounter are Autodesk Inventor and also Pro-E or Pro Engineer. All 3 of these CAD packages basically operate the same way. They're kind of built on the same principles, so if you know one, it's easy to know the others as well. If you've had prior experience in any of these software packages, that is great, but just as I mentioned before in the class, I'm going to assume no prior knowledge with these software packages, and we're all going to learn together. So please follow along with me. Put me on pause when you need to work on something. This exercise is meant to be run in parallel to you actually completing the exercises alongside me. So let me explain where we are right now. So you should have SolidWorks open. So if you're working on an eCalc lab computer, you should go to Apps Anywhere and open up SolidWorks through Apps Anywhere. It'll take a little bit to load up the first time. You'll then come to a blank work environment. That's where we are right now. You notice that my version of SolidWorks, I'm running this off of my desktop, is a little bit older perhaps than the one that you're using in the eCalc. I think you guys are up to SolidWorks 2018, or I don't know if the 2019 launch has come out, but not much honestly has changed in the fundamental stuff that we'll be using. So the buttons will still be in the same places and all that. So your version may look a little bit different, but it's still fundamentally the same. Alright, so what we're going to do now, folks, is we are actually going to start creating a 3D object. We're going to work in 3D space. And to do that, we first want to create a new document, right? So just like in most software packages, you see the blank document tab. You're going to click on that, and then it gives you some options. You can either make a part, an assembly, or a drawing. As we move further through the class, we'll work on all 3 of these, but for right now, we're just going to focus on parts. Parts are 3D objects. We're going to build something in 3D space. Then I want you to click on OK. All right, where you're taken to then, folks, is a blank 3D space. This is the world of 3D, virtually, okay? I can tell that because I have this little these axes down here in the bottom left. So I have my X, Y, and Z. I'm in 3D space. There's absolutely nothing going on here. Okay, so we're going to practice doing a couple parts. I'd like you to work through this with me, and once you're cleared, I'll tell you that you can move on to something else. But we're going to practice making some really simple parts to start that are designed to get you used to some of the base level functions for making 3D objects. Today we're going to focus on 2 different functions. That's extrude and cut extrude, and we're going to focus on using those in different ways. So let's start out by starting to create this object in 3D space. So what we're going to do is all 3D objects originate as 2D sketches, which you then perform a 3D operation on. So we're first going to sketch. So you'll notice over here you've got some tabs. The ones that we'll be working on most are the features and the sketch tab. The sketch tab allows you to sketch things in 2 dimensions, and this looks kind of like, I don't know, the functions in, I don't know, Microsoft Word or Adobe Photoshop, right? You can make circles and rectangles and all this kind of stuff. Features has these weird sort of functions: extrude, revolve, sweep. Okay, we'll talk about them in class, and we'll start to use them in lab. But these 2 tabs, features and sketch, are the 2 tabs that you'll be using the most right now. The other thing I want to orient you to is this command hierarchy here. So this is basically a record of all of the things that are set up for you by default when you open up a SolidWorks file. So we automatically have planes and an origin, right, that tell us where we are in space. We have a material that we can assign to a particular part. We're not going to do that just yet. And then as we start to do things in this space, you'll notice that more and more lines are added to this tree, and that gives us some control over our part if we want to go back and edit it, and we'll practice that today as well. So here we go. We're going to start by sketching. Okay, and I'm gonna, when I go to the Sketch tab, I now need to click on Sketch. This is the operation that I'm gonna perform. And the first thing it asks me, so one thing you need to get used to here is if you select a button, so I have a button that's pushed in and grayed, there's typically a command that's happening over here, or a prompt. So SolidWorks really does help you along. So it says select a plane on which to create a sketch for the entity. So it wants you to select which 2D surface or 2D plane you're actually going to sketch on. So I'd like you guys to select the front plane. You can see I can select top, right, or front. I want to go ahead and select the front plane. And now I'm going to create my sketch. So where we are right now, folks, is we are actually in 2D space. We are on the front plane. Anything that we sketch right now is going to be on that plane. So I'm going to create a rectangle. Okay, so I'm going to click on the rectangle tool. And then just to keep things consistent, the way that this rectangle tool is going to work is it's going to require a center and then an outer edge. So I'm going to click and then come on out and click again. I'm using my left mouse button to do this. Click at the center and click at an outer edge. Now, if I like that shape, and I do, I'm just going to click the green button to lock it in place. So now I have sketched this blue rectangle. These lines here, you'll notice they kind of look like center lines. They're actually construction lines. So these lines here are object lines, so they're going to be a physical boundary between the object and space. And these dotted lines here are actually construction lines that help define that rectangle. All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this rectangle, I'm going to extrude it or pull it forward to create a cube type shape, to create a block. In order to do that, I have to get out of 2D space and I need to perform an operation in 3D. This is our first 3D operation. So I'm going to exit the sketch, okay? Then I'm going to go to my Features tab and I'm going to select Extruded Boss Base, or this in some programs is going to be just listed as Extrude, the Extrude command. If I select that, because I've just come out of that sketch, it's pretty smart. It says, hey, I think you want to extrude this rectangle that you just sketched into a block. And here's one thing you can do. You can actually pull, whoops, excuse me, what am I doing there? There is a Control-Z command or an undo, just like there is a, I'm just going to show you guys. I'm going to try this again. Okay, so extrude. And then you can actually stretch this. So if I click on this guy, I can stretch it forward or back. And that was what I was trying to do in that last command. So there I am. Let's say I like the look of that block there. Okay, and I'm going to click on OK. All right, so at this point, guys, you've kind of freehand sketched a block, right? You've created a rectangle and you've extruded it forward. But we didn't really lay down any precise measurements. And that's really the crux of what you're going to need to do as an engineer, right? Very rarely are you going to create objects that don't have dimensions to them. So I'd like to try this again, but I want to put dimensions into this drawing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to start a fresh part for this. And then later on I'll show you how to do the editing. But we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to make this a 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch cube. All right, so let me just save this work. Let me show you how to do this. So at this point, I've got a part. I've got a 3D object that is not saved. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. It's going to save your part, so I'm just going to save on my desktop. And let me call this My First Part. And you'll notice it's saving it as a particular file type, a .prt or a .sld PRT. PRT stands for part, SLD is SolidWorks. Okay, so it's saving it as a part file. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this now that I've saved it, and I'm going to start again. So if you're following along with me, we're going to make another part. This time it's going to be a 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch cube. Okay, I'm going to do the same types of functions. I'm going to sketch on the front plane. I'm going to go to my rectangle tool and I'm going to drag out. I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to use this feature called Smart Dimension. Smart Dimension is your best friend. Okay, I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to click on a dimension that I want to prescribe. So you see here, the way that I originally sketched this rectangle is 2.6476961 inches. Okay, so I want that to be 1 inch. This guy here, also 1 inch. And I'm going to click OK. So now I have it 1 inch by 1 inch. You notice that my units are coming up as just units, right? By default on my settings here, I have this set to US units, ANSI units. If you're curious about where you can change those settings, you would go over here to your history or your document tree, and under Part, you would right-click and you would go to Document Properties. You can set the units here, there. So inch, pound, second is where you'd find that. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to get out of the sketch, and I'm going to go to Features, and I'm going to extrude again. This time I'm going to prescribe that I'm going to extrude 1 inch. So you'll notice here, under Extrude, I have some options. I can control the direction in which I am extruding. I can control whether or not I'm coming from the mid-plane of the object, or I'm coming blind off of one edge, and I can control how far I'm extruding. So this is now half depth, and this is the full 1 inch depth that I wanted. Okay. All right. So that's a 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch cube. I now want to show you guys, I've been kind of whizzing around the screen a little bit with my mouse and reorienting the object. When you are using SolidWorks, it's really important that you have a 3-button mouse. So the mouse that's sitting in front of you, if you're in eCalc, is such a mouse. It's got 3 buttons on it. If you're working on your own computer, I really strongly recommend you pay $30 and get a 3-button mouse, okay? So the one sitting in front of me has a left and right button and a center button that's also a scroll function. So left button is generally meant for selection. Okay, so I can select different things with my left button. I can select this edge, right? I can select. Right button tends to bring menus up, hidden menus, and that'll be useful. You then have a scroll button. Scroll button is a zoom. So that's going to zoom in and out on the object wherever you've got your cursor. So see here, I'm zooming, but I'm zooming in and out right at my cursor, and that's not centered on the object. Okay. The last thing is if you hold in the scroll button, hold in the scroll and spin or move your mouse, hold in the scroll and move your mouse, you can reorient the object in space. You can turn it. Okay. So again, left is going to be your tool for selection, left click. Right click brings up hidden menus. The scroll function without pushing it in is going to zoom, and pushing in is the scroll button, and moving your mouse is going to turn it. Another kind of nice feature here is, we haven't talked about this guy yet. This menu up here, these functions up here, help you orient the object on your screen. So the one that I tend to use a lot is actually this guy here, view orientation. So if I do that, what it brings up first is this view cube. Okay, and I can use this to get a view on my object. So if I want to look at it from a particular face, right, it's telling me exactly where I'm going in space. All right, so those are some tips. All right, so I have my 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch cube. I'm pretty happy with this. So I'm going to hit save, and this is my second part. It's a good habit to save these files. These are pretty simple, but as you get further and further in, there's nothing like working for an hour and a half and forgetting to save. I've heard screams emanating from the eCalc because of that. All right, the next thing I want to do, gang, is I would like to show you how to add on to an object. So this extrude function, this additive property of sketching and pulling forward, right? This can be done on any surface. So I have a cube here, right, that's got 6 surfaces to it. Let's say that I want to add a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch cube coming right here. So I want it to add off of this side. So how would I do that? Well, I'm gonna sketch. This time I'm gonna sketch on the face of the object. That's where I'm gonna start, right? So I'm gonna sketch, click on the face. Now I'm on the face of that object. You can see that because of these arrows. These arrows tell you, hey, you're glued on the face of this object. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to put a rectangle down, but I'm going to use a different feature for my rectangle. So under the drop-down menu on rectangle, I could do a corner rectangle instead of a center. If I do a center, I'm not going to be able to take advantage of this corner here to draw it. So thinking ahead a little bit, I'm going to do the corner rectangle command. I'm going to select this edge. You'll notice that SolidWorks is pretty smart. It identifies certain points that it thinks you may want to use. So I'm going to click here, left click, and come down. And I'm not too worried about being exact on my dimensions here because I'm going to go ahead and use my Smart Dimension tool to say that's a 1/2 inch, and that's a 1/2 inch. Now I click OK, and I'm going to exit the sketch. And just to see what SolidWorks is doing, I'm spinning my object a little bit. Now I'm going to do an extrude. Okay, and again, SolidWorks is smart. SolidWorks kind of says, oh, I think you want to go this direction. I do, but I only want to come out a 1/2 inch, so I'm going to change the extrusion length there. All right, so that's pretty cool. Now let me do something else. Now let's say I want to cut in a 1/2 inch off of this corner. So I want to do a 1/2 inch cube, but I want to be subtractive. I want to take away material when I do that. This is going to show us our second 3D operation, which is called Extrude Cut. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to sketch again. I'm going to sketch on this plane. I'm going to select the corner rectangle. You can see now I didn't orient my sketch plane, like I didn't worry too much about changing the orientation of this guy to do my sketch. If I wanted to, I could do this and look at it dead on. I'm going to use Smart Dimension. Click OK. I'm going to exit, and under Features, I've been using this command, Extrude Boss Base. Now I want to use Extrude Cut. So I'm going to click on that. And it's, again, smart, right? So SolidWorks says, hey, I think you want to cut into the object based on the sketch that you made. And I can, again, control the depth of the cut. So there it is at 1/4, there it is at 0.75. Right, if I wanted to, I could say, I'm not going to measure it all, I want to go through all, and it would take it through the entire section. But I'm going to do a blind cut, and I'm going to go a 1/2 inch depth. Okay. All right, so you can tell where I'm going with this, guys, right? I'm making an object that's somewhat looking like a puzzle cube. Okay. So with that, folks, I'd like to pause, and I'd like you guys to try to make something that looks somewhat like this. Call over the TAs, the coaches, if you can use any help. Okay, this is not a race. Take the time that you need to practice the extrude and the extrude cut and practice sketching on various surfaces. If you get through this, I'd like you to wait for further instructions from the TAs. And in the meanwhile, I want you to work on creating your puzzle cube pieces. Okay, so you can, if you feel comfortable doing this and you're ready to tackle the puzzle cubes, go ahead and start on that. Remember, we want for assignment 2, we'd like to see each of your puzzle cube pieces modeled in 3D space and saved as a part. All right.